Welcome to the Empowered Life. I am your friend, Ern Inyon. This podcast aims to inspire you to create the life that you want to live. If you are not yet a subscriber, be sure to subscribe and get notified when a new episode is posted. Now let's go on with the show. Hi everyone. Last Sunday was a historic milestone for the speech language pathology profession here in the Philippines. My wife Weng shared the history of the Republic Act 11249, which is the act regulating the practice of speech language pathology here in the Philippines. It is 45 years in the making from the time speech language pathology was first offered, and 30 years from the time my wife submitted her college thesis that became the basis for the law. Yes, the formulation of the law started with her college thesis. I can't even remember anymore what my college thesis was. Very few people get to participate from the beginning up to the fruition of their thesis. It is such a beautiful story of hard work, grit, and teamwork. I was in the event also, handling the visual presentation and the sounds. I was looking at my wife and I can see how happy she was. Many people took pictures of her as if she was a rock star. Well, she was, along with her fellow PRB members and trustees of the association that sacrificed their time and energy for many years just to reach this incredible milestone. The event last Sunday was a culmination of an extraordinary journey. But what really made it extraordinary? I am not a speech language pathologist, but I stood in the sidelines long enough to give you an eyewitness account of how this extraordinary journey unfolded. So here's my version of the story. For many years, the SLP or the speech language pathology profession struggled with obscurity. Many people do not know what they do. They were very few. In fact, when my wife Weng graduated in 1993, they were only 6 in the batch. They were not part of the recognized professionals of the Philippine Regulatory Commission, although at that time it seemed not practical to regulate what was already few. The first time I heard that there was such a profession when I got to know my wife 25 years ago. When I read her thesis, those were my questions and doubts. But my wife had a different view. I can still remember what she said. It was not about the quantity. It is about the quality. During those years, there was a growing concern about the widespread of pseudo, quote-unquote, speech therapists. There were schools who offered 10-month program that allowed graduates to become communication specialists. The demand for speech therapist service was high, even up to now, but the qualified speech language pathologists were few. Those schools took advantage of the demand. There were countless occasions when my wife got hold of kids with speech disorder, but their parents claimed that they were seeing a therapist for many years, only to find out that the therapists they were referring were not qualified. I don't want to use the term pseudo therapist because I believe the graduates were also victims of the program. I saw the frustration, the anger, and bewilderment all mixed up in the face of my wife. After we got married in 1999, we were all set to leave the country and settle in the US. I am an engineer by heart, and it was my dream to work in Silicon Valley, California. But when I asked Weng what was really her dream, she told me that she wants to help Filipino children with disabilities. So I bade goodbye to my dream of working in Silicon Valley, and after 4 years, we founded Trails. During those years, our priority was to stabilize Trails. But along the way, my wife was also monitoring the progress of the speech language pathology bill. She shared to me there was a number of times the bill was so close to being approved in Congress and in the Senate, but changes in the government prevented it to progress. The frustrating part was, those bills that were not approved by the previous administration, and when the new set of government officials were in place, You have to start from square one. That was essentially the story of the bill for the next decade. A group of SLPs will attend the hearing for the bill, and it won't make it for approval. The story was like this, up until 2014 when Wang was nominated to be an officer of their association, which is the Philippine Association of Speech Pathologists. Wang immediately saw it as an opportunity to make a difference in the SLP community to help the bill become a law. She spoke to me about it, and I told her that I will only support you if you become president. I know there were others who were equally qualified to be president, but I don't have the time for a learning curve. I know how my wife works, and her mission was clear. And together we work fast. At first, she was adamant of taking the role of president because, quite honestly, we had our hands full in trails. We had two branches at that time, and we were working on several projects. We spoke in the evening, and I told her to sleep over it and tell me, and I told her to tell me her decision in the morning. So in the middle of the night and deep into my sleep, she woke me up and told me, "Let's do this." So I said, "Why, sure, baby." I was about to get naked when she said, "I will run for president. I need your support." And I said, "Oh, okay," was my reply. When they came, I wrote a letter to our speech therapist at Trails and asked them if they can campaign for Wang in the coming elections of officers. Our therapist went to work. When the results came, Wang was number one. Now it is time to work for the presidency. Now, how it works in the association was the elected officers will vote among themselves who will fill the roles of president, vice president, and so forth. She barely knew Susie, Ken, Dane, and others at that time. So Wang made a speech while she was running for president, and why vote for her? Well, to cut the long story short, she eventually got voted to be the president. After getting the presidency, we immediately got to work. The mission of the new PASP officers were to have an online presence, host two general assemblies a year, conduct seminars, host the first national convention, partner with ASHA or the American Speech and Hearing Association, and work on the SLP bill. We first assessed the state of the association, and oh boy, there was so much work that needed to be done everywhere. It had little money, there was no system in place, and they had no papers. So it was like asking my 75-year-old father in law to climb Mount Everest. But for some reason, these guys believe that it is possible. They got elected in October, and they want to host a General Assembly by Christmas with enough progress to present to the members, basically to jumpstart and to have everyone's enthusiasm run high, because by July 2016, they will have the first national convention. Looking back, it was so ambitious, but the important thing was they believed. I have worked in the back room all my life, as an accountant, an auditor, an HR practitioner, as an IT professional. So problems with SEC, BIR, and the local government unit, I got them all covered. It wasn't easy, but I just knew what to do. Perhaps the hardest part was getting the signatures of the trustees and officers. Wang and I went to UP Manila to get Mom Joy's signature. Then we go to the Green Hills to meet up with Mom Gigi. We drive all the way to Fairview. That's about 20 kilometers to meet up with Mom Ting. And the farthest was Bernice, who was the corporate secretary at that time, and she lives in Batangas. Gladly, nobody lives in Baguio. So although we had fun driving around Metro Manila, Then we work on the website. Actually, it wasn't just a website. What we launched was a membership management portal. Every PSP member had a login credentials, and membership payments were all done through the portal. Registration to all events are also done there. Susie and I, we work on the finances and projected how much money we are going to generate. So by December, during the General Assembly, they presented the portal, the newly minted SEC papers, and they announced that by July 2016, they will have the first national convention. That made everyone excited, believed that PSP can reach greater heights. 2015, 2016 were the years in steroids. 2015, they filled the calendar with workshops to raise money to build the momentum. Dane, Ken, Bernice, and Sam, those guys were just amazing. Jerry, who is the most recognizable person, prompt instructor here in the Philippines and in Asia, conducted several prompt seminars. That meant revenue for the association for hosting the seminars. However, the money coming in from the seminars wasn't enough to make a down payment for the venue for the national convention. The group was targeting SM Aura Convention Center as the venue. This was already too ambitious for the trustees and to everyone who were used to holding general assemblies in McDonald's and Shakey's. But this is the first national convention, and speakers from the US and other parts of the world are coming over. So to raise funds, the group opened early registration for the convention and encouraged members to pay for their membership fees. As a backup plan, Susie, Jerry, and my wife Wang all pledged to pull from their personal funds if, in any case, money will fall short. When the national convention was launched with its theme Beyond Borders, everything went as planned. All invited speakers were there. It was a proud moment for the Filipino SLP community. By this time, the group had accomplished so much. We got the portal running, government compliance check, money was there, and they hosted the first national convention. Now it is time to focus on the SLP bill and partner with ASHA. The officers had to be held over for a year to make a better transition. Wang attended the ASHA convention in 2017 and established a connection with ASHA. She also headed the legislative committee to lead the progress in the SLP bill. The term, this term, the PSP officers, the significance of what they did is that they gave everyone the reason to hope and to believe again. So by 2018, the new set of PASP officers hosted the second national convention. This time, with the president and other officers of ASHA in attendance. Wang and I volunteered to give the guests a tour. So we used our van and borrowed my brother's IAs and brought the guests to UST, UP, and Intramuros. In the van, the seating arrangement was Wang was at the front seat, the president of ASHA at the back, together with the officers and speakers, and I was the driver. So we had an awesome time. My wife was beaming. Um, it was probably so surreal for her as an SLP. At that time, Wang's focus was on the SLP bill. I can say that working on the SLP bill is a lot harder than hosting a convention. There were times that the secretary from the Senate would send corrections in the morning and needed them in the afternoon. There were Senate hearings that will call 11 a.m. and you need to be in the Senate by 2 p.m. So the awful part was, after dropping everything, drive as fast as you can to be on time, only for the hearing to be cancelled because a couple of senators opted to have a fist fight instead of going through the session. It was during those times that your patience was tested the most. During this time, you can sense that the entire group of trustees, officers, and former officers were already unshakable. There was a team handling the Congress part, another team handling the Senate part, making sure both bills are moving. On March 22, 2019, President Rodrigo Duterte finally signed RA 11249, the act regulating the practice of speech language pathology in the country and capping the extraordinary journey. What made this journey extraordinary was from the time the journey started, the creation of the association and the drafting of the thesis, the first ever national convention up to the final push toward the signing of RA 11249. Everyone who worked believed that what they were working on was worthwhile, regardless whether they will be acknowledged or not. They were all willing to do, especially during the time nobody was clapping. They simply understood they were working something bigger than them. To see the exceptional in the ordinary is what made it extraordinary. It was a beautiful recap of history my wife gave last Sunday, a story every Filipino SLP should know. By knowing the history, we hope that it will bring respect, honor, and the responsibility to carry the torch even to greater heights. And as for me, I am still not a speech language pathologist. I just happen to love one.
Thank you so much for listening, friends. Please rate and review this podcast and share it to your friends. Until next time, blessings always.